There we go. Good morning, everyone. We're so happy to have everyone here for our service this morning, and welcome as well to all of our guests from the Sacramento Master Singers. Let's go ahead and rise as we're able and sing Morning Has Come.
Wow. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. If you're here with us in the sanctuary or you're with us on Zoom, we're really glad you're here. And you can't hear me. You can't hear me? You will shortly. I really love singing next to our music director. I just draft on his voice and I feel so accomplished. And I'm Roger Jones. I'm one of the ministers serving this congregation. And my colleague, the Reverend Lucy Bunch, is our preacher today. And her sermon is entitled Fairness. We are really happy to have all of you here, some people we haven't seen for a while and some brand new people. Welcome and welcome back. And we are very happy to welcome the Sacramento Master Singers as our guest musicians today. They rent our sanctuary for their weekly rehearsals, so they have better attendance than some of you do in this space. A number of our beloved UUSS members and staff members have been part of the Master Singers over the years, and you will see some familiar voices as they sing for our service today. Many thanks to their director, Dr. Ralph Hughes, and to their wonderful pianist, Heidi van Regenmorter.
Recording.
On the back table, you'll find postcards telling you about their upcoming holiday concert schedule. If you'd like to follow what's happening today in order of service, you can find a copy on the back table. If you're with us on Zoom, you can click the link in the chat and you can have the order of service. Also on the back table is our weekly blue sheet, which has a weekly calendar of events here and upcoming events. And that's also on a link in the chat. We invite you to explore all the ways that we live out our mission, which says we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. Our weekly message comes out by email every Friday, and you can find it on our website if you haven't been receiving it yet. It has news and announcements of events, invitations to volunteer opportunities, and a weekly message from one of the ministers. And One of the things that you will read about in there is that Interplay is happening here. It's happening this coming Tuesday evening with Reverend Lucy and friends. Interplay is a wonderful way to build community, have fun, and just be present. And it's Tuesday night here on campus at 7 o'clock. If you're new to UUSS, we're glad you're here. Please fill out a newcomer's card, either at a link on our website that you should see in the chat or at the welcome table after the service. And that will help us connect with you. And today, also if you're new, is the day of the monthly newcomers orientation and tour of the campus. So after the service, grab your coffee and come back in to meet Lucy at the welcome table. And it will last about an hour. And childcare is provided if that will be helpful, and everybody is welcome on the tour. After the service on Zoom, we have 12 minutes of conversation in breakout rooms so you can get acquainted. And here on campus, you can get acquainted over coffee and refreshments on the patio, the covered patio. And you can check out the connections table in the hall. I want to mention, if you are the parent of a child in grades 4, 5, or 6, today is a parent information session after service about our values-based sexuality education program, which is starting in January. It's called Our Whole Lives, and it's at noon over there in the first classroom, the FAS room. And next Sunday after the service, another parent thing for any parent who wants to come, a 30-minute parent conversation to discuss religious education and family ministry here. You can meet our volunteer teachers and bring your ideas and questions. It starts at noon over there. And remember, next Sunday is a soup Sunday, so you won't go hungry. Last night we had our annual service auction with a lovely dinner. Thank you to everybody who made it possible and to everybody who participated. And there is still time to bid on all of the 90 events and meals and services in our silent auction. It's online and it closes at 11:59 p.m. tonight. You can find it through a link on our website, but please wait till after this service to bid. During Lucy's sermon, I do not want my phone vibrating every time somebody outbids me on something that I really want. And speaking of cell phones, please set yours to silent mode right now so that we can all be present for the service without distractions. And now we will receive the music for centering from our guests. They will sing Ubi Caritas et amor Deus ibi est, Latin for where charity and love are, God is there.
Tibe amus et amemus Deus. Simeamus et amemus Deum vivum, Deum vivum. Et ex corde diligamus nos in cielo, et ex corde diligamus nos in cielo. Ubi caritas et amor Deus tibi est, congregavit nos in unum Christi amor, Christi
Thank you so much for that centering music. My name is Daniel Myers. I'm the administrator. My name is Daniel Myers. I'm your worship associate for today. I'm going to speak a chalice lighting, and Archer and Reverend Roger are going to light the chalice after it's finished. We light this flame to ignite the sacred power of justice. We light this flame so that it may be a beacon of hope. In moments of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and the unknown, we light this flame and are emboldened by its blaze, knowing our strength as a prophetic and powerful people is rooted in the diverse ways we answer the call to love.
You kids, this is your time, and this is your song, remember? You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with a foot. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with a foot. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Good morning. Oh, am I on? Oh, no, now I am. Good morning. Good morning, everyone on Zoom. We're so glad you're here with us this morning, and I'm so glad that you're all here as well. One of the things that binds our community together is sharing our joys and sorrows with each other. And two folks have gone online and on our form that you can find in the weekly message to tell us about things that they want the congregation to know about their lives. So Celia Buckley has shared that her sister Connie has completed her first session of chemo and is doing really well. Many of you know Connie. Doing well, and we'll be deciding soon about treatment going forward. So we send love and blessings to Connie. Jan Kelly is sharing with us a series of unfortunate events. And this is one of those where you're grateful you're not her, but that opens your heart to caring about her. She was in a car accident, broke several ribs, and then they had a cruise that they'd already paid for. She thought, well, I could just go on the cruise and recover on the cruise. Well, it was a really good idea until she got COVID, and the coughing caused her a lot of pain. So, big sympathetic sigh. Oh, and let's send our love to Jan and care to her. And we have some other things to sigh about. I don't know if you've heard, but our democracy appears to be very resilient. So I think that deserves 3 deep breaths, each one let out with a big sigh. So let's breathe together. Oh. 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 Amen. So this morning, I've been reflecting on our Universalist forebearers. You know, Unitarian and Universalist were 2 denominations that merged in the 20th century. And our Universalist forebearers, their message was all about love. At a time in the early 1800s when the message was humans are depraved and we're all going to burn in hell unless we do exactly what God wants us to do, they said, God is love. God is love. No God would ever send his creatures, his creations, to hell. Their message has come forward to us now in the 21st century as the message of universal love. So I want to share with you this morning a centering prayer that comes from this Universalist heritage. And I've talked to you before about centering prayers. This is sort of a mantra. Well, in meditation, when you have a mantra, it's a form of centering prayer. This comes from the Christian tradition where you repeat phrases to help calm yourself, ground yourself, help yourself feel centered and present. Isn't that an important part of prayer? To help ourselves feel calm, centered, and connected. So what we're going to do this morning is, how many phrases does it have? There's 4 phrases. So I'm going to say it, you're going to repeat it back, and then we're going to do it 3 times together. If you can't remember the words, just listen and take the words in. If you want to say the words with me, do so. If you want to say them in your own head, that's perfectly fine. So here's the first phrase. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. So let's say that together, or be present as we say it together 3 times. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. And now let us take a few minutes for the prayers, minutes of silence for the prayers in our own hearts. Amen.
All the days feel like winter, filled with shadows and gray. Eyes are heavy, spirits drifting, seems it's always that way. For a young child deep within, I long to sing from my heart out a light that I can see shines in you and shines in me.
Yes, you are like a starry sky. Yes, all the leaves of every tree. Yes, you are all the sweetest songs heard in the heart. Dream, let us always, always dream. Dream all the world could ever be. Dream every blessing we receive deep within this joy. Here we are, breathing ease in this holy place. Every morning we have known mercy and grace. This is the healing gently flowing in us. Only joy, only joy. Here we Yes, you are like a starry sky. You have always been. Yes, all the leaves of every flower, petals floating free. Dream, dreams, always, always dream. And ours life could ever be. Dream, dream, as we share and share so deep in this love, holding us, holding us. Love is always holding us, free from fear in the blessing of resting in you. We are yours, yours only. Here we belong. In this dark, in this light world you have made. Only this are we all together, silent, silent. Only this, and that we know heaven, heaven that we feel. Only love has lost, only love is within. Love rivering in us, love walking with us still. This world love has made where we are. This world love has made where we are.
Amen. Thank you. The reading for the service today is a parable of Jesus of Nazareth. It comes from the New Testament's Gospel of Matthew, 20th chapter. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them 1 denarius for the day's work, and he sent them out into the vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still more people standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired at about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received 1 denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," one said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for 1 denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?"
In our togetherness this morning, we invite everyone to stand and sing "Our World is One World."
I feel that I'm a pretty fair person. All of us here and on Zoom have to make fairness decisions all the time, whether we're resolving a dispute among our kids or deciding how much to tip the server. The ultimate question, I guess, is whether I feel that I'm being fair and why. But what if I feel that someone else is not being fair to me? Sometimes I can shrug it off, but sometimes I can take it very personally. I've actually talked with a therapist about this because of a story that I'm about to tell you. And the therapist has helped me learn that I have an inner child that is constantly in fear of losing things that are valuable to me. When I felt that my mom was not being fair to me, I worried that meant that she didn't love me. And that's frightening to a little kid who depends upon his parents for his very survival. Well, that fear still lives deep inside me, even though I'm a self-sufficient adult now. So when I sense that someone is trying to take advantage of me or not treating me fairly, that fear of loss can get triggered. And I have to remind myself, this isn't personal. I'm not being abandoned. Relax. Well, about a year ago, my wife Frances and I were boarding a plane. And according to that airline's open seating policy, we were allowed to choose any seat that someone was not already sitting in. I think we had a tight connection, so I wanted seats up front, but many people who had boarded before us were saving the empty seats next to them. Well, that wasn't fair. Those seat savers weren't following the open seating rule. And likely because I was stressed and feeling overwhelmed, I think I took it personally. By not following those rules, those seat savers had deprived me of my right to choose the empty seat of my choice. And that feeling of unfairness and being taken advantage of just went straight to little 5-year-old Danny's primal fears of loss. And without really considering the consequences, I almost got into a fight with a man who was saving 2 seats for his family members. Now, people who know me know that this does not sound like me, and they're right. Was I really going to fight someone over an airline seat? To be honest, I was so deep into my anger that I hadn't thought past the next words that were coming out of my mouth. I had no idea at that moment what my plan was. I guess my amygdala perceived that I was about to lose something valuable, and it went right into fight or flight mode. And this time, my rational brain didn't kick in to help me pause and put the situation into proper perspective. Fortunately, my wife was there to intervene, and the situation didn't escalate any further. But I did have trouble letting that go. I tweeted the airline, and for a while, I considered never flying them again. But in the end, I realized that none of it was personal, except my overreaction. And so I've flown that airline again, and what I do now is I prepare myself. I tell myself, I'm going to see people saving seats. And I remind myself that my primitive brain is going to be triggered by what it perceives as an unfairness. And I may experience an irrational fear of losing out on something valuable. And I'm going to let that little 5-year-old Danny soothe and move on.
Our congregation's mission statement says, we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. And we live this mission in many ways, including by the practice of generosity, by giving away half of every Sunday's offering to an organization in our community working to heal the world. Our community partner for this month of November is the River City Food Bank. It's the oldest continuously serving food bank in this county. There are locations in Midtown and in our Arden Arcade neighborhood. Their services are needed now more than ever. Please give generously in support of this important organization. On the slide, you can see the ways that you may contribute electronically or by mailing in a check and it's posted in the chat box too. You can even text your donation from your seat. The River City Food Bank provides emergency food and other kinds of emergency assistance. It offers referrals to promote self-sufficiency through a variety of programs. It serves families, it serves children in troubled or economically disadvantaged schools. It serves homeless people, working people, immigrants, and people who have lived in Sacramento County all their lives. Thank you very much for your generosity to them and to this congregation. The morning's offering will now be given and received. Thank you. Please join me as our ushers bring forward the gifts of our offering. Join me in the unison response to our offering. May generosity bless our world. May gratitude nourish our spirits.
Okay, that got my heart rate going. Let me take a minute to settle in here. Thank you, Master Singers. It's so wonderful to have you here today. I'm really filled with joy. So, like most of our moral constructs, fairness is hardwired into us. But fairness doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, and it's not the same for each of us as we develop psychologically. For preschool children, fairness means sharing, following the rules. For elementary age, it's the idea that everyone should be treated equally. And anyone who has a child in middle school knows that they have a keen sense of justice and injustice. Our sense of fairness can evolve as we age, based on our life experience and our willingness to be open. In my family, my mother had an extremely developed sense of fairness, and for her, fairness meant equal treatment, according to her concept of equal treatment. At dinner, she would always count how many of something we had of a certain item, like meatballs, for example, and make sure that each of us got the exact same number of meatballs. Now, my father would always play with this and try to take an extra meatball. We all go, "Daddy, that's not your meatball." So fairness was instilled in me. As I reflect back, I realized that her sense of fairness didn't include the possibility that equal distribution wasn't necessarily fair. My father was a grown man who worked a physically demanding job. Wouldn't it have been fairer for him to have a larger portion? This sense of scrupulous fairness was applied to my sister and I. So if my sister got a car at age 17, I should get a car at 17. If she could go to a PG movie at 13, I could go to a PG movie when I was 13. Of course, the fairness often collapsed under begging, or simply lapses in my parents' vigilance. And as we grew older and my sister and my needs differed, my mother's calculus of fairness became more difficult to maintain. Now, my father, whenever we complained that something was unfair, would always say, "No one ever promised that life would be fair." Not exactly what you want to hear when you're a kid, but if you knew about his family history, you would understand where he got that perspective. So I want to explore fairness with you this morning from both an ancient and a contemporary perspective. Contemporary psychologist Jonathan Haidt has studied fairness extensively, along with other dimensions of morality, and explains it all in his book, The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. He describes how a sense of fairness developed in humans as a way to create cooperation and cohesion among non-related humans. As he said, fairness is about making sure people get what they deserve and do not get things that they do not deserve. His book explains how philosophers and psychologists argued for centuries whether our morality came from our rational or our emotional side. But the advent of brain scans cleared that up quickly. Our morality is hardwired into the intuitive amygdala centers of our brain, and only somewhat mediated by our rational minds. I know some of you are familiar with Haidt's metaphor of the elephant and the rider. The elephant is our intuition leading us forward, while the rider, our rational self, tries to influence the elephant. Not kicking, I guess. What would you do riding an elephant, trying to influence? Scream a lot and pound on it. Not really having much of a useful. The rational self doesn't have a whole lot of control over the intuitive self. Now, this awareness may be useful to you at Thanksgiving next week when your uncle refuses to listen to any rational arguments about whatever issue you disagree on. So it goes with our moral groundings. They are visceral. Dan's reflection is a perfect example of the elephant and the rider. His elephant was ready to pick a fight over who owned an empty seat on a plane. His rider didn't stand a chance, but luckily he had outsourced some of the rider functions to his wife, Frances, who helped bring him to reason. We care deeply about fairness, and we are not the only primates to feel that way. Monkeys have an innate sense of fairness. There was an experiment where pairs of monkeys were given a task to do, and they received a reward. One monkey got a grape, a highly coveted treat among monkeys. The other monkey got a piece of cucumber. The monkeys who got the cucumber were often so upset they would hurl the cucumber to the ground. Now, lest you think that we're more evolved as humans, it has been noted by psychologists that we often respond so negatively to violations of fairness that we're willing to assume personal costs to avoid it. We throw away our cucumbers too when somebody else gets a grape. So we're clear that everybody cares about fairness. However, it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. In his work, Haidt has found that people who identify as liberal in their thinking have a very different sense of fairness than those who identify as conservative. And remember, this is part of our wiring. For liberals, fairness usually means equality or equity. Everyone gets what they need, like my father and the meatballs. Liberal sense of fairness is aroused when they sense oppression or exploitation. For conservatives, fairness means proportionality. People should be rewarded in proportion to what they contribute, in proportion to their effort. According to Haidt, conservatives consider it unfair to take resources from some in order to give to others who they consider to be undeserving. So with all this in mind, let's turn to that parable from Jesus. Now, first off, I want to give you some context for parables. Jesus really wanted to provoke and confuse people. He wanted to challenge them to think differently. That was the purpose of his parables. And often there wasn't a clear right or wrong answer. He wanted people to engage deeply. We have no written record of the specific lessons that Jesus wanted to teach us with each of these parables. So we're left to interpret them as we can, just as Jesus intended for the audience that he was preaching to. So this particular parable, the parable of the vineyard workers, has commonly been interpreted by Christian scholars as a story about salvation, that the landowner was God, and he chose to save everyone who repented their sins, even at the last minute of their life. But the lesson that I want to draw from this morning comes from an interpretation by Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish scholar of the New Testament. Jesus was, after all, a Jew. In his teachings that they had brought to us through the Gospels, Jesus himself was not really that interested in salvation. He wasn't that interested in the hereafter, but more about how we lived here and now. His kingdom of God was here on earth at this time. Jesus, as described in the Gospels, was clearly a radical socialist. This is evidenced by his ministry to the outcasts of society, to the poor, to the disenfranchised. He spoke out against oppression and the tyranny of the Roman Empire, which of course earned him an early death through crucifixion. So given this context of Jesus' teachings, let's look closely at this parable. which Levine calls the parable of the disgruntled vineyard workers. For indeed, they are. As we heard in the reading, all workers from this landowner got the same pay, a fair day's wage, whether they had worked all day or 1 hour. The workers who had worked the full day were offended and thought this was unfair. Though they didn't throw their money away like the monkeys did with the cucumbers, they were very upset. I remember when I first heard this parable in a sermon many years ago, and I thought, well, how can that be fair? The people who worked all day shouldn't get the same pay as the ones who only worked an hour. People should be paid in proportion to their effort. When you heard that parable, you may have been thinking the same thing. So the landowner here is the key to our interpretation, and the landowner is very clear and very direct. When confronted by the workers who had worked the full day, he said, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous?" Despite these words, we're still not quite clear on his motivation. Clearly generosity, but to what end? Nor do we know much about the reasons why the latecomers did not make it to the marketplace earlier on the day. Perhaps they had family obligations, or they were sick, or perhaps they were working 2 jobs and they were trying to have another opportunity towards the end of the day. According to Professor Levine, the way Jesus constructed this parable, the full-day workers really could only complain that the landowner was too generous to others. They couldn't complain about the way he had treated them because he fulfilled the obligation to them. She says that the point of this parable is not that those who have get more, but that those who have not get enough. The parable challenges us to consider that one does the work in the labor force not just for reward, but for the benefit of all. The next day, perhaps, the first will be last, and those who grumble in the evening about bonuses will be desperate in the morning for having any kind of job at all. According to Levine, Jesus was challenging the hearer to think beyond their own parochial needs, to consider the health and well-being of the larger community. So while the landlord's actions might have felt unfair to the individuals who had worked the full day, he was acting out of care for the whole, that everyone should be taken care of, all those who showed up and were willing to work, regardless of their circumstance. This is indeed a challenging idea, one that asks us to step outside ourselves and consider the greater good, something that can be very challenging in our individualistic society. I think the lesson of this parable can be applied to many of our contemporary issues of fairness. Student loan debt forgiveness. Radical generosity to one group of people, those who took out student loans in the last however many years of those who qualify. So those who have a proportionate sense of fairness may think, hey, nobody forgave my loans. I had to work really hard to pay them off. And now my tax money is going to use to support lazy slackers who probably didn't even finish their degree. It's a little harsh, but it's likely that there are some people who are thinking that. So what would Jesus say? If we're concerned with the health of the whole community, then we would support the offering relief to the least among us. For indeed, that's what this program does. The greatest number of people who would benefit from the debt relief plan are low-income individuals with less than $10,000 of debt, some who have had their credit destroyed by their inability to pay. And yes, there are likely folks who will benefit from this program without deserving it. But on the whole, who is hurt by giving them financial relief? And how does our society gain from them being back and fully engaged? Fairness in the context of the greater community takes on different dimensions than our personal sense of fairness. For those who view fairness as a matter of proportionality, that we all should get what we deserve based on our efforts, I challenge them to consider fairness over time. I challenge all of us to think of that. When the Biden administration announced that Black farmers would have access to loans and resources specifically for them, people cried, unfair. Race should not be a factor. Each should be judged on their worthiness. Tell that to the generations of Black farmers who were denied loans and support because of the racist practices of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Where was the fairness for them? A similar issue came up recently in the Supreme Court hearing regarding affirmative action, a case brought forward by Asian American students who were denied admission to Harvard and North Carolina University because of the consideration for racial balance in the student cohort. Our newest Supreme Court judge, Judge Ketanji Jackson, made an important point about the fairness of the admission process. She said, "We're entertaining a rule where some people can say what they want about who they are and have that valued in the system. I'm worried that that creates an inequity in the system with respect to being able to express our identity." Her argument was that students whose family have a legacy of attending the college can get preferential admission because of that legacy. Their story and their history are all part of the consideration for their admission. But a student from a legacy of slavery would not have a chance to have their history considered. None of their ancestors could have attended the college because of racism in admissions. So what is fair? I sympathize with the students who were denied admission because affirmative action pushed them out. But we must look beyond the individual. No one guaranteed them an admission to these schools. What is the greater good? How is the greater good served in this situation? What do you think Jesus would say? I'm sure that many of you can think of other contemporary examples of the challenge of fairness. So how do we measure fairness, and on whose terms? How does the greater good come into play? How do we factor past unfairness into current decisions? Can we rise above our emotional response to fairness to see the possibilities of the greater good? Who is best served by seeing fairness as proportional? The status quo, the privileged, the individual? So after approximately 20 minutes of talking to you about fairness, I may have left you thinking that fairness is complicated, for it can be. But I think Jesus would make it very simple. Err on the side of generosity. Consider your privilege when you consider fairness. Think about the larger purpose than just the people in front of you. Tolerate the whining of those who are stuck in a limited individualistic perspective on fairness. And be kind to yourself when you feel that way as well. And of course, always, and most of all, be grateful. So may it be.
Rise with us as we sing, "Come and Go With Me," as we journey towards the land of fairness.
And now, as we extinguish our chalice, please join with me in the unison words. We extinguish this flame, but we carry the light, love, and commitment of this gathering into the days to come.
Let's open our arms to each other. Let's open our arms to our friends on Zoom. Let's open our arms to our community and our world. And let us remember that there is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Blessed be.